this episode of Fuel Talk, we're going to react to Roadkill, my favorite show. In this episode of Roadkill, David Freiberger and Mike Finnegan did an LS swap in the middle of the PRI show in 2014. Upon completion of the show, they road tripped the Crusher Camaro back to California. What happened to them is that they ran into a fuel pump failure, and we're going to break that down.
This whole deal was blatantly bankrolled by Holley, who challenged us to pull the big block out of our Crusher Camaro and install an LS engine in 3 days in front of the entire industry at the Performance Racing Industry Trade Show in Indiana. And what that was going to mean is taking the car all the way cross country from LA to Indy, and then swapping the engine and driving home with that brand new motor, and doing it all in the freezing rain in the dead of winter. Hitting the road in the dead of winter in a 700 horsepower 67 Camaro might not be the smartest thing to do. And a lot of guys on Facebook made sure that I knew that it was not the smart thing to do. But you know what? It really wasn't that bad. The way I look at it, what did people do in 1967? They drove their 67 Camaro in the snow. And we had our Continental tires, which were way better than what was available back then. And yeah, we had 700 horsepower, but we were able to keep it under control. In Roadkill fashion, we ended up finding ourselves on the way to Arkansas, and the Crusher was running money. It was really good cruising down the road with this thing. The drivability was a lot better than the old big block. Not as cool looking, but plenty violent. Right up to the point where the fuel pump died. Holley gave me 3 reasons why this was going to happen. 1, because the fuel pump is vertical instead of flat. They say that can get air in it and tend to overstrain the pump. 2, because we've got the regulator before the fuel injection rails, which is a pretty normal deal, but they say that it causes the pump to work at the higher pressure to then regulate down, so it overworks the pump once again. And 3, because the pickup on the pump is about I'm going to say that much higher than the bottom of the tank, and in theory you want the whole pump below the bottom of the tank so that the weight of the column of gas is feeding the pump. I naturally thought all of those things were like hyper scientific things and that we would get away with it, and apparently I was wrong.
I can understand where David Freiberger goes, well, I'm not sure whether that contributed to the problem. I can really understand where he's coming from. Of course, I think that Holley was just giving pointers about some of the things that they saw during the show, probably. I don't think it was in direct response to what happened to him on the road. But we're going to go through these point by point. The first part, as you can see, mounted vertically, this is just a guess on my part, is that it's plumbed like this. Pickups are commonly used, and they really shouldn't, at least not for EFI. That may have been a contributing factor of this. One of the things that Holley, I guess, was talking about being mounted vertically. I've heard that over the years. You know, I've had lots of people ask me, can it be mounted vertically or horizontally? I'm like, doesn't seem to matter really. But Holley always said that not to do it, and I think there's a good reason to it. And as we can see on the diagram here, where if you had it mounted vertically like this, there could be a pocket of air that forms in the pump section here. And one of the things about air being introduced into the system is that the efficiency of the pump drops dramatically. If the pump is pumping a gas like air, it's not as effective versus pumping the liquid. So when you have air in the system, a lot of times your capacity or your flow capacity will drop off dramatically, and in fact maybe won't even keep your pump primed and allow for flow to continue. On a carbureted system like he had before with the big block, that doesn't matter as much because air entering the system can eventually get through. Even if your fuel pressure drops off dramatically, you still are able to pump flow through the system, and that helps pumps keep prime. Unfortunately for an EFI system, the only way that fuel will flow through the system is if it's at the relief pressure of the regulator. So if you're not under pressure and you drop off, let's say even 5 to 10 psi, your flow rate will go to 0, and that can be a problem. It may be possible that that is what happened to the system. As you can see, I don't have a straining filter shown, and on a 67 Camaro or whichever old generation of cars back then, they had pickups with the strainer filters attached, but usually for modified vehicles, they won't retain the -6 line size or 3/8 line size that they came with, because they can be too restrictive for a modified fuel system. So one of the tricks a lot of people do is grind them out, throw in a 1/2-inch tube, and pick it up directly. Now if you pick it up directly without a straining filter, you can introduce debris that can damage the pump or put it in a locked position. Now I believe that this is the pump that they're using is shown right here. It's a dual pump system, and they introduced this system back at that time, so it's not surprising that they used it here, and it refers to it showing that how they got going again was to turn on the other pump.
That pump has 2 pumps inside it, a redundant one, so I can just wire the other one and it should work.
Go ahead and do it then.
My dome is to the highway here. I'm not gonna look, I'm just gonna ignore it. All right, do it.
Okay.
Hit the key.
Yay! Let's hope it lasts.
Now, how debris can affect it could lock up the pump. I doubt that happened. A lot of times, if the pump locked with the debris inside of it on a brushed fuel pump such as these, your current draw will shoot very high and often could result in a blown fuse. However, debris can get lodged inside the vanes within the pump itself, essentially preventing it from being able to build pressure. As far as diagnostics of determining where that pump is, one of the things that would help is the pump spinning, or is the pump locked? Of course, in this situation, we have winter conditions, and a lot of times the colder the temperatures are for a pump, the less efficient some pumps are. It really depends on the pump design. I know I've designed pumps with, I try to favor using composite rotors and stuff like that, but and those can have a difference in how they swell, or they can have different amounts of what I would call internal leakage, inefficiencies of the pump, and that can be worse under colder conditions. Maybe that was a contributing factor. Sometimes on these pumps, and it shouldn't affect this one, that if you run them dry for a long time, especially like especially on turbine pumps, is that if they run dry for a while, they can end up damaging and seizing. I doubt that happened on it. I've run pumps I've designed for in excess of 45 minutes without any fuel flow. Just and yes, it got extremely hot. Couldn't touch the pump, just ran it. We just did a test at the end of a trade show one day, and sure enough, just put the fluid back in. Everything was fine. There was no damage from it, but you can't guarantee that from all pumps. Especially the pump that I designed that we tested on it. It had carbon vanes, sling vane design, and it many times carbon composite components. They're used in vacuum, so you can't be any harsher than that. I mean, not only are they used for in air, but in vacuum too, which can concentrate the heat. But getting back to his failure, the second reason that they showed, plumb before the rail, I think it's an interesting note to talk about, which has nothing to do with this failure. They talk about, at least David Freiberger told us that they said it would overstress the pump or change the operating characteristics of the fuel pump. And as you can see, if you're on one side of the fuel rail versus the other, the pressure should not be that much different. You're relying on the pressure being the same or close enough to being the same, whether you're at the front or the end of the fuel rail. So being at the front or the other side of the fuel rail really won't affect the pump. I'm surprised that they even say such things, but that's the way it goes. There are some advantages and disadvantages of where you locate the regulator relative to the fuel rail. One of the things are that if you show it in this configuration before the rail, one of the things is that you can have vapor and air trapped inside the rail, and the only way that that can be purged is through the injectors. And that would probably show up like during startup. You might little sputter and pop and whatever until the fuel or the vapors exit into the engine, and it won't take long. That'd be one disadvantage of it. Something that Freiberger wouldn't care one way or the other. I'm sure that he would not even notice that. One of the advantages of doing a system like this is about heat buildup. Fuel rails, sometimes they're directly attached to intake manifolds, and I've seen a lot of problems with that, run into problems dealing with that. And then you can have engine temperature directly bolted up into the rail itself, and essentially the fuel being used as a coolant. And that can really heat up the fuel and cause other issues. We'll talk about those issues in a minute. But as far as the location of the regulator, that had nothing to do with any of this. Now, when he did talk about mounting slightly higher than the bottom, a lot of times that we want to reduce the amount of inlet pressure or inlet vacuum, how hard the pump has to pull on the fuel, because you can have cavitation. There's a lot of confusion about cavitation, in that it is the vaporization of the fuel inside the pump assembly. Normally that wouldn't be a problem, just like if slight bit of air gets introduced, it's not a problem for the pump to cause failure. But cavitation is a lot different. Cavitation will start destroying pump surfaces, and in short order can destroy fuel pumps. So that's why they're in the back. It isn't so much that one pump pushes better than or pulls better. Now, different pumps have different resistance to cavitation, that's for sure. So I think that where it gets confusing, oh, well, this pump is a puller pump, or this is only a pusher pump. And they pull and push at the same rate. It's really about what conditions occur at the pump inlet. Here we will show an example of more of an ideal way of setting up a external fuel pump. A lot of times drag racers will use this, or others, to put a sump at the bottom of the fuel tank and draw from there. Another thing I always recommend is also putting the return line back into the sump as well. For one, it keeps the sump area always full if you're low on fuel. But another reason too is that you don't end up stirring up the fuel, and a lot of times you can end up stirring up a fuel and putting air into the fuel itself. One of the common things that I see people doing is returning the fuel directly into the top of the fuel tank. That seems well enough and not to cause an issue. However, the fuel entering directly into the top surface of the fuel can put air into the fuel and even introduce air into your system, and that will change how well your system operates. I hope this helps everyone. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below, and I'll be able to answer them. If you have, please like and subscribe, and share it with other motorhead friends, because there's a lot of topics that we will talk about and help you have a more reliable fuel system. Thanks. I got to meet Mike Finnegan at a SEMA show one year. It was really interesting. Came up to our booth, never heard of us. And so I started talking to him about our stuff, and he was talking about a boat project and the boat system he was working with. And I kept going, you know, I've met you before, and you've told me all about this. You sure you've never been in here? He's like, yeah. I looked down at his badge, and we all wear badges. And sure enough, Mike Finnegan, and then I go, oh, Roadkill. That's why I've known about his boat project and everything. But he was a really nice guy. He seemed like he was a little bit overwhelmed with electronic fuel pumps and everything else, and he was looking for something that was very reliable, and understandably so. A lot of times with drag boats, you got to understand too, and he talked about this point, is that a lot of times if you have a failure, you just can't just reduce the power right away, because that can actually nosedive the boat and end up killing you. A lot of times if there's a fuel failure or any type of failure, if the engine is still running or having problems or even ejecting parts, you got to still keep the throttle on in order to save yourself and let it die naturally. It's a lot better to kill an $80,000 engine than end up killing yourself.